Okay, so we have talked about balance as a ledger, the universe's ledger, and as a tool we can use to evaluate cause and effect and um, why people do things on different levels, psychological, chemical, biological. And then we talked about windows of perception being part of what we can do to pay attention to balance on a human level without any scientific tools. We can just use our senses to increase our awareness of balance as it is going on. So now I'm actually using notes for this. I am going to talk about native states. Okay, so a native state is any matter that has been untouched by consciousness. In other words, we would deem it inanimate. Now, this is a bottom-up thing. So as matter gets assembled with chemistry and other things into life, and that life moves up the spectrum of consciousness, you get closer to non-native states. So what I mean by this is a particle of iron, okay, a molecule, its native state is just to exist and it'll have let's say the sphere of possible, what do you call it, vibratory range, like we talked earlier with the ball bearing. But other than that, it has to follow the laws of gravity. It's just going to, oxidize in an open environment. It's going to interact with other chemicals, and it has no agency to stop any of these things or to affect anything on its own. Okay, even if matter has an innate awareness or consciousness due to forces like acceleration or things like this, and I'm not saying that matter is intelligent or sentient. I'm saying there may be a data awareness from forces applied to matter that could be extrapolated as some sort of awareness on a molecular level, right? So as we move up the consciousness scale, we get to something like a bird. And a bird can use tools. Okay, so now you have a creature that is smart enough, conscious enough to take snails. I watched this one video where this guy's saying this is I think it's a wren's anvil or something. It was a rock, and these birds pick up these garden snails and crush them on this rock. There was all these shells collected, right? So once you add life and gradients of intelligence into the equation, matter can move in non-native ways by being moved by living creatures. Okay. So everyone talks. A lot of people conjecture about the multiverse. Well, it doesn't make sense, conservation of energy and things like that. It doesn't make sense for multiverses to be propagated by anything other than non-native events. Okay? So a squirrel choosing, tree A or tree B is not going to split a multiverse. There is no mechanism for that. Now, we're not dealing with we're not talking about an infinite universe where the squirrel was going to choose. They chose all the trees. We're just talking about one universe, one world, one squirrel. So, without consciousness, you have no non-native states. Everything is simply reacting to physics. And you also have no multiverse propagation without non-native states. So what propagates a multiverse? Well, let's say you have a human, okay? Imagine everything in the world without humans. So if you imagine this as like the invisible man or woman, right? And you go to get a cup of coffee and you go and grab the mug and you take it and get the coffee and put the milk and the sugar and all that. Just imagine that cup floating in the air without you doing anything. That is an example of matter exhibiting non-native behavior because it is basically going against gravity. Okay, so it's like an anti-gravity effect that is only possible with a sentient organism in the loop. Okay, so you could say that environmental forces like wind or rain or lava or lightning or any of those things could move things around. Yes, they could move things around, but nothing is going to take clay and bake it into the shape of a coffee cup and then move the coffee cup through the air, defying gravity. So with the application of a conscious person or animal or what have you, then you get the ability for matter to take on non-native behaviors, such as anti-gravity or, properties that do not exist in nature, or the creation of plastics from petrochemicals and stuff like that. Okay, so now we get to humans. Now we have a creature that basically, we think we're the smartest thing on the planet. I question that. I think we have the greatest potential at the moment to affect the most things. But I also think that intelligence is a function of the output, or your behavior. But anyways, so we have the ability to make things like fusion reactors, fission reactors, aircraft, things like that, and move matter in non-native ways. And the more intelligent we get and conscious, and the better our tech gets, the closer we get to building something that could cause an effect that would propagate a multiverse. For instance, let's say that during a nuclear test, okay, there is an effect on the space-time because of the speed of the explosion or whatever have you. So that would be the closest we probably have ever come to propagating a multiverse because of the forces involved, the non-native forces. When we do particle acceleration, we also may be closer to multiverse propagation because of the speed of the particles, the particles that they create, the reactions. So as far as humans, our native states do have caps. Okay, so we can only jump so high. Now you could say, oh, well, there may be an athlete in the future that can, jump 13 feet vertical, okay? But if you did the math on the muscle mass and the forces and all this, no one's going to jump 30 feet into the air. No one in a native state is going to jump that high. It's impossible, okay? So that's an example of a cap, all right? There are also limits to our perception abilities, and our cognitive abilities and all these things. So unless you are using transhumanism or someone uplifts us or something like that, we will have these native limits that are baked into what we define as human, and they will affect, to an extent, the non-native states that we can create in our environment, and thereby whether we are actually, theoretically propagating multiverse. So a practical application of this is looking at the balance ledger, the balance, okay? We could say, if we're talking about free will, that there are limits to what we can claim as ownership of behavior. If someone says, I want you to go up there and dunk the basketball, right? And the person is like 4 foot tall. It doesn't matter how much free will they use or claim that they have, they will not physically be able to do it. Just like the 30-foot vertical jump. It's basically going to be impossible, okay? So in that instance, the free will, the only part of it that would be free will is if the person went up and tried to do it and failed. The result that is being looked for, the dunk, would be impossible, okay? So when we're looking at even simple behaviors, like when you look at the Shaolin monks, okay, they are extremely disciplined and they meditate all day and, practice martial arts 8 hours or whatever a day. They're disciplined. They're ensconced in their temples and stuff. They went on tour with Lollapalooza years and years ago, and they said they had to stop doing their feats of strength where they were like bending spears with a point in their neck and all this other stuff, because there were too many distractions. So you're talking about some of the most focused, disciplined people on earth, saying that there was too much going on for them to keep their rigid discipline, and they thought they were going to hurt themselves or something. The reason that this is important is because some people claim that there is free will, okay? And they say, if you say, what is free will? They're like, well, I can do whatever I want. I can decide, whatever I do is my free will. Well, first of all, there's caps to what they can do because of native limits, native ability limits, native states. Then there's also limiting factors as to discipline, self-discipline. Most people are not extremely disciplined. They're disciplined in very small areas, like they got to go to work, or, they don't want to yell at their uncle at Thanksgiving or whatever. But they're not extremely disciplined. Even the most disciplined people still can't get exactly what they want or execute exactly what they want in balance all the time. So if we're talking about the average person, they have a low level of discipline. Okay, their diet is going to be a factor in what they do. So if they have low blood sugar, they're going to be hangry. Okay, without the discipline, the level of things you can claim as free will behavior decreases in proportion to the lack of discipline and the environmental stuff going on in your body's systems. Above and beyond, my possible theory for multiverse propagation, due to consciousness and intelligence putting matter in non-native states, it is a window into the mechanics behind what people can claim as free will. I'm not saying it excuses anything, because ultimately, even if you had no discipline, you could just lay down on the floor, and do nothing. I mean, non-action is still a function of free will. You can just not do the thing, right? So I'm not giving anyone excuses. I'm not saying that, well, they didn't have free will. I'm saying that to claim that everything you do is governed by free will, I think is false. And I'll get into why, later when we talk about free will, but just know that when I'm talking about native states, I'm talking about when I'm talking about matter, I'm saying without the intervention of conscious beings moving it, okay? Like your coffee cup floating through the air with, it's not going to do that. It's going to follow the laws of physics. So the laws of physics govern, all inanimate objects. And then the laws of physics are still governing, the coffee cup when you move it, but now an intelligence is giving it properties that counteract some of the laws of physics, like, gravity and momentum and stuff like that. And this also gets into the movement of balance, right? So, like I said about the dog scaring the person and they jump, there are, let's say, thousands of clocks running in the body. Some of those clocks can be slowed or stopped, let's say. But a lot of them, once they're in motion, they are only going to stop when they complete whatever cycle that they're currently in. Okay, so like the person in midair has to complete that arc to land, according to Newtonian physics. There are other things that are going on inside of you that may have to finish their arc, and that can affect what we're going to consider as free will, and it affects what the ledger looks like. So, like, let's say they say men clear stress hormones slower than women, right? So a man gets pissed off, his testosterone goes up, his cortisol. It's going to take him longer to get rid of those. That is going to directly affect how his free will manifests, like how much self-control and discipline he can exert, because now he is under duress from those chemicals, and he's got to work those chemicals out. If he were a Shaolin monk, he would still have those chemicals, but he would have the discipline to, compartmentalize that part of his biology, But like I said, on Lollapalooza, they couldn't do it, and they had to get off the tour. So how much discipline does it take? That's a good question. I guess I'll try to go into free will next, but it's kind of complicated, and it's a lot of it's very theoretical for me. Like, I'm trying to work it out, ongoing. So we'll see when that gets put out.